Oh, okay, I'm good here.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, and we don't see the black box on our end.
Okay, they're all set then.
Yep. Andy, do you want to have us record it, you doing an introduction, or do we want to just dive right in?
Yeah, I sort of catch me off a little bit off guard here. I mean, I know Wayne, but
It's up to you.
yeah, our first speaker will be Wayne Cole, who's written a number of books on railroads, interurbans, and the steel industry in both the Ohio River Valley, the Beaver Valley, and Youngstown, Ohio. And this is his latest book on the Lake Branch, Newcastle to Fairport, and it will be sold at by the company store. So Wayne, if you want to start, why, go right ahead.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Here's the cover of the book, and it's 304 pages, and very typical of my other books. I'll point out any mistakes are mine in the book because I do everything myself. But here's what is in volume 19, but not in the PowerPoint. And it's a history of the Painesville and Youngstown Railroad and the forerunner of the P&Y, the Painesville and Hudson. And in 1886, it became the Pittsburgh, Painesville, and Fairport, and eventually, the P&W and the B&O. But once again, what is in volume 19, but not in the PowerPoint? Fairport, Painesville, and Eastern, and it's the company that was owned by the Diamond Alkali in Painesville, Ohio, and it was a big customer for the B&O. And here's a picture of their caustic, soda plant with an FP&E eastbound train, westbound train out to the B&O interchange. Once again, what's in volume 19, but not the PowerPoint? The Grand River Railway, which today operates 2.5 miles of old B&O trackage in Painesville and in the community of Grand River. And Morton Salt, I may talk about once or twice, and it's their primary, customer. Once again, what's in volume 19, but not the PowerPoint? The Fairport Harbor operations, and in particular, the iron and coal industry, which was served by the B&O. And there's several sections on both those industries. But what's in volume 19, but not the PowerPoint? There's 9 pages of B&O Lake Branch. And in this case here, it's in the Fairport area, and it's very very complex. And each page on the track chart, I give a brief explanation, as some people might not be familiar with the Lake Branch. And sometimes I refer to the Erie Escarpment, and this is the beginning of it going up to Chardon. Now we begin the actual, what I like to think of as the Lake Branch, and it's going back to Newcastle, PA. As early as 1886, B&O trains were running out of Newcastle up to Painesville, and from Newcastle, to Pittsburgh. And basically it was a Painesville 92 and 97. They had the Butler Turn, which ran out of Painesville to Butler, PA, and they had a nickname for that train. It was called the Mortgage Breaker, because you'd be gone so long, and the railroaders would make a bit of money. It's about 80 miles to Fairport out of Newcastle. In Newcastle, it's kind of reminded me in these 1971 shots a little bit of Painesville, because both yards are really downgrading at that time. In Newcastle, they had a small hump yard, which you can see here, and we're looking west towards UN Tire. And the Newcastle Roundhouse really, in later days, really wasn't involved in the, Painesville operations that much. But prior to 1956, they turned EM1s on the turntable here. And basically, you were running from Newcastle to OW Tire on the B&O New Main Line to DeForest to Painesville. I should mention here, there's a bit of a rivalry between DeForest and Newcastle in 1890s, who would have that turntable and be the main center of operation. And here we have, over here, 7300. It was a Painesville man to Newcastle in the 1940s. And it was, one of the main, steam power on the Lake Branch, EL6A, and this is in Newcastle. And over here, and also they had EL3As and EL5As, but the 6 was the main source of power. I just wanted to point out back here, they had this shot's in Grafton, West Virginia, but it has a 3-truck tender. And it only appeared on the Lake Branch, very few times. It wasn't very common. And here's OA Tire. This is the west end of Newcastle Junction. Here's the the P&L Lee line crossing the B&O up into Newcastle. And OA Tire, served the the westbound trains. Here's another shot of it. You can see OA Tire here looking west, and P&LE station and dispatchers, operators building over here. And this slide here, I included same shot as above here. You can see the sand tire, but this is in 1971. The passenger trains were coming to an end. But when the passenger trains would pull up on this westbound track, a gentleman would come out with this blue light here and, signal to the passenger trains. And, I often would go up there at night just to watch them. Now, 20 miles to the west, we've left Newcastle. We're over at the B&O Old Main Line and New Main Line in Hazleton. And it gets very complicated in the Youngstown area. And so basically, we're going to be looking at the Old Main Line up to Avon and Niles, and then we're going to be looking at the New Main Line up to Ohio Junction or OW Tire, and then the Girard Cutoff over to Avon. And like I said, it's a very complex area, and the Mahoning River kind of divides, the two, Old Main Line and the New Main Line. And another one in my book, Ghost Rail 17, covers this in a little bit more in detail. And Center Street, people are maybe more familiar with. Here we have the eastbound Main and the westbound Main. And this is, the New Main Line, going up and, crossing over the Mahoning River up to OW Tire. And there's Republic Steel located over here. And this is what it, looks like today. Here's Republic Steel and, with, CSX and their westbound and eastbound Main. One thing I'd like to point out is #1 track over here. It was called the Wall Track, but it was always called the Wabash Track. And in one of my books, I think maybe volume 16, I offer an explanation of it. But in researching here, Salone Humphreys, who was president of the PP&F in 1886 for a couple of years, when it was owned by the P&W, was also president of the Wabash. And I just kind of wondered if there was maybe some kind of connection on this Wabash track with Salone Humphreys, but it's pure speculation on my part. I never found a good explanation of why that was called the Wabash track. And now here we have, Hazelton Yard. We have the new main line over here on Bridge 16, and the old main line over in this area going up through Youngstown. And the old main line also, it was the canal area for the P&O, Pennsylvania and Ohio Canal. Now this is maybe about a mile up from the previous shot, and we're going up alongside Republic Steel in Youngstown on the north side of the Mahoning River. Take note, the main line of the PRR, which is the Lordstown secondary today, is about a quarter mile off to the left here, of the left. But as we advance up the river, these tracks are going to change over. Here we have the Erie Canal branch and then the B&O Canal branch. And this is maybe about a half a mile up westbound from the shot over here with Republic Steel. We have the B&O, freight station over here, which was actually in operation, well up to the 1970s. They had a job working out of the Hazelton yards. But the old main line extended no further than that. Now this is about a mile or so up the river from the previous shot. Notice the PRR now is to the extreme right, whereas before it was to the extreme left. Then we have the B&O in the Erie, and then the LE&E is running over top of the structures here. And these structures over here no longer exist. And this is all valoric steel. And this was a stone plant served by the Ohio Central. And this is Division Street Bridge going across. North side would be over here. The new main line would be about a half a mile to the left of the photograph. Now we're still going up the B&O old main line. We're in the north side of the Mahoning River. We've passed Youngstown Sheet and Tube, and this particular shot, it shows you, this gets really complex. This is Route 80 going across. Over here would be Ohio Junction, OW Tire, and the Girard Cutoff is going to come across and swing around, and it's going to end up over here in Girard, a place called Avon. This coal tire is still standing. Here we have a Detroit Edison train is coming over the old LE&E tracks. And these are Pennsylvania tracks. Now, the Norfolk Southern, but in a pre-1920 era, this was the old main line B&O. In the 1920s, they had a lot of realignments. This a bridge coming down here, it's off the Liberty Street Bridge. It's good access area to see, some of these different interchanges in here, but not a lot left today. And I want you to kind of remember this particular shot, because when we come up to the new main line, we're going to end up back over here. So here's Route 80 Bridge. And like I said, complicated area. Over here to the far left would have been in the Erie and the PRR. And then you have the Erie Canal branch. And this is the post-1920 B&O. The Girard Cutoff from OW or High Junction would be located here. And the far side of the tunnel over here would be the pre-1920 old main line going up to the coal tire, near the coal tire you saw in the previous picture. And here, this shot is about, maybe 2007, the CSX stone train going down to the stone industry that I pointed out a few shots earlier. Okay, we're going back to Hazelton Yard. And now we're going to new main line to OW Tire and the Girard Cutoff. This was, Bridge 16. with an eastbound train. This is a B&O yard office in Hazleton. And here, kind of a, similar shot. Here we have a B&O eastbound train and, a GP9, which was working at Republic Steel. But underneath there, underneath Bridge 16, you notice the dual track here. It was for, Republic Steel, both their narrow and standard gauge tracks going back and forth from the Bessemer plant to the open hearth. About a mile up the new main line, we passed the Youngstown station, which is still standing today. And oftentimes I get asked a question, where did the Lake Branch actually end, and in this case, I like to think that it ended over here to the left. And this is the end of the Painesville and Youngstown Railroad. Never made it over across the Mahoning River, at least not until 1886, when the Trumbull and Mahoning Railroad, which was owned by the P&W, crossed over the Mahoning River into the Hazleton yard. About another mile up, we come to a common name, Yonda, and the old P&Y and the T&M, and we're on the south side of the Mahoning River. And this particular shot was taken, I took about 2 years ago over at Yonda. You have a Youngstown and a Austintown train. It's going to be going up the siding here in a moment, CSX westbound train. But the coal mine tracks that you see over here would be located, maybe just down in this area here. And one big puzzle that I never fully, solved, Painesville coal was located in these areas on chutes underneath these tracks. The P&Y is running along here on the Mahoning River. Youngstown Sheet and Tube would be located over here. And likewise, iron ore in the early years on the P&Y would come down from Painesville underneath the trestle, and there was a switchback, and the chutes would load into cars and then take it across the river over to Youngstown Sheet and Tube. But like I said, it's a very complex, area. Now we're going up about another 1.5 miles to the B&O OW Tire and Ohio Junction, and the Youngstown and Northern Railroad, which was located in this area here, and the P&Y was actually built on the Youngstown and Northern. And at this point, the Girard Cutoff Bridge is off to the left across the Mahoning River, going over to Avon and Girard. But here we see an EM1 going down Newcastle. Sometimes they would run in reverse from DeForest to Newcastle. They wanted to save time and money to get on the workload for the next day. And this was the BO tire, which was a Y&N tire. A cabin, I should say. It really wasn't a tire. And we're 59 miles from Fairport here, at this particular point. And now the next slide, we're back over underneath the Norfolk and Southern Lordstown Secondary, and that complex that where the CSX stone train was. And here you had the Erie Canal Branch over here, and the old B&O main line would be on the far side of the tunnel, and the cooling tower would be off to the right. Now we're up at Now's on the B&O old main line. It's milepost 53, and here we have it's an eastbound train. You can see the signal mast. This is in Now's. Now the P&Y came through Niles, and P&W built upon the P&Y, but in Niles, the P&Y crossed over to the south side of the Mahoning River. And these are some of the remains of that particular trestle. And that was from about 1873 to 1886. And then it was a Trumbull-Mahoning Railroad to the 1886, maybe to the late 1890s. I never could find an exact date when the Trumbull-Mahoning, stopped operating into Niles, but they operated into Youngstown on the B&O as a Trumbull-Mahoning commercial branch up into the late 1970s. Here's my friend Bud Puskarich, is a well-known rail fan, and a lot of my books, I like to give compliments to all the rail fans, and I often went exploring with Buds, and here's some old ties from a P&Y siding in Niles, and it crossed over Mosquito Creek. You don't hear a lot about Mosquito Creek, but it was a kind of a real important little creek that ran through Niles. Has a lot of railroad history. Now we're in DeForest, and it's a Lake Branch, junction with the B&O and the P&W and the old main line. This was for a number of years, it was called, the Pittsburgh, Painesville, and Fairport Junction. But now to explain a little bit, this was a B&O old main line going west to Newton Falls over here. There was a B&O Y and water tower located here off to the left. The Erie tracks, the B&O crossover. Now this is the Lake Branch yard located over here. And the Erie P tower would be located, back in this area. And over here was where I have pointed out as track 9. It was B&O track 9 out of the Lake Branch yard. And track 9 was the original P&Y for about 2,500 feet off to the right. I'll show you in the next slide. But it served a Niles Republic Steel. Now, here's where P Tower is located in this area. And this is all some of the early DeForest yard. And DeForest Hotel, that's where they sold the passenger tickets. DeForest Road comes across. Here's your trackage to Newton Falls. Back here is to the old main line to Hazleton. But I referred to track 9, and this is the old B&O down here. This continues to Republic Steel, but up till 1886, the original P&Y went across the Erie tracks and over to this particular point, and it was slightly separate from the P&W. In the 1960s, I was up here exploring, and I asked a railroader, I said, what was this little right-of-way that I could still see here? And he just said, oh, that's just the old line. And he was referring to the P&Y. Well, DeForest is really no more. In February of 2021, they lifted the old main line. And DeForest was a very, significant, B&O junction and yard for many years. I included this shot in 1979. It's a B&O hot metal train coming from Hazleton up to Republic Steel. And the B&O didn't carry the hot metal trains too often. And over here is a 2019 shot of DeForest Road is just going by here. These tracks are gone. These buildings are still standing. And over here across DeForest Road was a Erie hot metal train, Conrail. But all you see here are spacer cars, and it's returning to Hazleton, a couple miles down here off to the right. Now we're at milepost 0 on the Lake Branch. We're in DeForest Yard. P-Tire is located up here. Here's the old Erie tracks and track 9, cooling tire, water tire over here, and the the location of the Y, and the B&O old main line, and the westbound and the Lake Branch tracks were located here, going up here to the crossover. I think in 1957 they tore that cooling tire down, maybe in 56. There's another shot. This is both shots were Herbert Harwood photographs. There's an EM1 ready to start up the Lake Branch. I wanted to point out that all northbound Lake Branch trains would take on water here. If they didn't take on water here, they would have to do it at the West Farmington station, water station. Now we're crossing over at P-Tire. Here's track 9. Here's the 1977 B&O unit for the 150th anniversary. I think they only numbered 2 units for 1977. I'm not 100% sure about that. Now, here we have another 74 B&O train, crossing over. And we have P-Tire in Erie colors in 1976. They painted it very quickly, Conrail gray. Now we're starting up the Lake Branch at DeForest. Here we have a southbound, EM1 7600, ready to cross. It has clearance to cross over at P-Tire. And these tracks over here lead to the Lake Branch yard at DeForest. There were 3 tracks, roughly 800 to 1,000 feet long. We're at Niles Road, milepost 1.0 out of DeForest. And here we have a district run. It was just a local, train out of DeForest going up to Copperweld. And it's in 1976, and it's waiting to cross at P-Tire. And this is the same location here. And these were streetcar tracks across the Lake Branch. And the Lake Branch had about maybe 5 or 6 different connections and interchanges with the streetcar lines. In this case, it's the Penn Ohio line, or the Mahoning and Shenango Valley, and they're removing the tracks at the crossover. 1998, this is the same area. This is the Lake Branch. The tracks have been removed. And there were 2 other interchanges, with the Lake Branch over here from the Erie that went out here to a couple little industries. Now we're advancing up, towards the Erie crossover, but a little sidetrack over here, about a half a mile to the east of the B&O crossover was the Pittsburgh, Youngstown, Ashtabula YN tire. And it was located about a quarter to a half mile up these tracks. Here we have a B&O eastbound track to Niles. Off to the left, we're going to have the crossover of the Erie. And, in 1873, they had what I call the Warren Railroad War, because the Pennsylvania did not want the B&O crossing. And for about 6 months, they kept, ripping down the trestle they were building. But eventually it got resolved. In a book, I have a page about the history of the railroad wars. Now, this is a view west on the Erie 2nd Division track. Off to the left would be towards Painesville, and off to the left in this area here would be B.O. tire. and it was closed in 1953. It had a woman operator at the end. Now we're about 5.3 miles from DeForest. We have the Copperwell district run job. I think it was called DR 14, but they would have a couple different Copperwell jobs. And sometimes, even in I refer to this a little bit later, sometimes they had as many as 30 to 40 to 50 and even 100 cars out of Copperwell in the 1960s, you know, bringing back to DeForest. And here's in 1960 at Luntz Scrapping, located back in this area towards Copperwell, where the EM1s were scrapped and other steam locomotives on the B&O. Okay, now we're milepost 6 is located down here near State Road. Copperwell would be in this area. And milepost 50 is located up here in Fairport and Richmond. I have another map. We'll talk about this a little bit later. But so we're going to be advancing to West Farmington, where there's the water station. Fales Spur, it's not on the map, is located right here. It's the beginning of the Swine Creek a grade going up to Summit and Middlefield and Burton and East Clareton. Chardon we'll be talking about. And I referred to earlier the Erie Escarpment. And it's about 10 miles from Painesville to Chardon. And it was all uphill grade. It was in this period up till 1946, the iron ore trains had difficulty climbing the Erie Escarpment. Sometimes eight helpers, 280 helpers in this particular grade. But we're going northbound from State Road now up to towards West Farmington. Now this is near State Road, and Frank Vohart, railroad historian, a good friend of mine, you know, magnificent rail fan, and he grew up along the Lake Branch, you know, living in a trailer right along the Lake Branch. And here's Frank, you know, standing. He's a 16-year-old, and the railroaders would throw off the B&O Railroad Gazettes to him. And here we have a couple of EL5s. You can see they're double stacks. And the EL6s that I referred to earlier were gone, you know, about 1950, and they were replaced shortly by the EL5s and then the EM1s. Then we have Dead Branch Creek, and it's Bridge 315. The elevation is the low point, and located right in here. And throughout my research, there were numerous ghost railroads that were never built, you know, both north and south and east and west, you know, wanting to hook on to the Lake Branch. And the one of them here was constructed, you know, as far as, you know, in this area, but never built up to Dead Branch Creek. Part of it was even using an old part of an old canal tunnel, you know, which I refer to in the book. But like I said, we're located in this general area, and we're going to Fales Spur next. Now, my mistake, Stroop's Crossing, just short of Fales Spur, milepost 14.9. This is a long straightaway on the B&O Lake Branch. You know, 2 or 3 miles long, was only separated by a 2 degree curve in the middle. And Stroop's is just a local name. At Fales Spur now, the elevation is 846, and this is where the helpers were placed on the trains. And it was a spur only maybe 350 feet long, enough to accommodate, one EM1. And there was a fatal wreck there in 1950, where a switch was misaligned, and a southbound train ran into a helper that was sitting over here on Fail Spur off to the left, with the loss of one life, engineer Mills. The drawing was done by Herbert Harwood. You can see Fail Spur up here, and located in this particular area. And you can see we're going to be climbing up here to Summit Siding, then on to Middlesfield. Bundysburg is where they often, in a diesel era, they would split apart the train. And they would carry half of it up to Middlefield, then the other half, then the engines would return back to Bundysburg and pick up the remainder of the train and pull it up to Middlefield, and then tie together. Here you can see the Erie Escarpment over on this, coming up from Painesville to Chardon. Now we're at Fail Spur. This is the summer of '57, and the B&O is kind of finalizing their plans. How many diesels do we need to replace the EM1s? In this case, they're going to put a helper on with two GP9s. And this is Fail Spur off to the left in 1982. Now we're just about a mile west of West Farmington. Actually, it was about 80 car lengths. They had it figured out exactly, to pick up water at the West Farmington, water station. And West Farmington was complicated for me also to figure out, the exact number of water stations they had. This was the latest, in the 1950s with the EM1s, and this is a helper backing down to Fail Spur. And I believe this was tire 4. Not 100% sure. Could have been tire 5. This was tire 3, and this is looking towards Fail Spur. But if you would explore this area today, just a tremendous amount of railroad archaeological ruins on the B&O. This is looking west. The West Farmington Bridge over the Grand River is off here to the left. This is looking to Fail Spur. But tire 2 was definitely located this area. It was a 35,000 gallon tank, and it was removed in 1920, replaced by tire 3 you saw in the former photograph. Here you can still see the water intake. There are rails growing up in trees, and the ruins extend for 3,000 feet with cast iron pipes. It was hard to get an exact reading on exactly what took place. And I even had valuation maps, and it pointed out some. Here you can see 2 different intake valves, and they were somewhat of located a little bit of a distance from each other. Now we're in West Farmington, and there were half a dozen industries located in West Farmington. Like I said, it was a busy little farm town. And I know that water tire number 1 was located at this point. It was a double tire. But what I don't know exactly is what the B&Y had here, maybe from 1890 to 1873. One of the industries they had in West Farmington was the Harmony Creamery over here, where they had special, B&O ice cars that carried milk every day into the Harmony Creamery in the north side of Pittsburgh. And this is Route 88, what you see in this shot right here. And a real fan photographer. I'm not sure who this gentleman was. Frank Volhart and Herbert Harwood, we're not sure either in our conversations. And off to the left behind EM1, there was an agriculture basket siding over here. There was another siding located over in this industry. And there was an equipment industry located over here. But by the 1960s, those industries at West Farmington were largely gone. Now here's where Bundysburg, and I like to think this is where the real action began. Going up the Swine Creek Hill. And here you can see the engine that they put on back at Fales Spur that we saw a little bit later. But in the B&O diesel era, this is where they would break their train apart, take half the train up the hill to Middlefield, run around, come back down to Bundysburg, hook up with the next part of the train and bring it up to Middlefield and hook up, and then continue to Painesville. And this is on the Swine Creek Hill, 20 curves, 3 to 8 degrees. I think the steepest grade was maybe a little bit under 2%. And here you can see one of the EM1 helper engines behind pushing. And this is in 1981, General Electric brought in July of that summer brought up some of their new engines to check the traction, and they would pull 6 loaded hopper cars up the Swine Hill grade, and they would even water down the tracks in order to make their test. And one night in the mid-July, when they were doing the test, someone released the brakes on the General Electric traction train, and the engine drifted down to Burton, not down the Swine Creek Hill. When going to Burton, the grade was much lighter. Now we're at Summit siding in 1956, and off to the left, we're on the main line here, going towards Middlefield. That's a Herbert Harwood photograph. And in this postcard view, there's southbound to the summit on Swine Creek Hill. Was Johnson Rubber, and it was a long time industry, served right up to the end on the Lake Branch. And they would 3 times a week they would pull 10-15 cars from out of the Johnson Rubber. And prior to that, it was Ohio Pale, and surprisingly, they moved lumber out of here. In a book, I showed the huge lumber yards found over in this area. In Middlefield, I mentioned about the streetcar lines. At Middlefield, 2 different streetcar lines interchange with the Lake Branch, Eastern Ohio Traction in Cleveland and Eastern. And they carried not only lumber over these tracks, but they also moved coal, and the coal would be moved over these tracks to the C&E, and they took it over to Gates Mills, maybe 15-20 miles towards Cleveland, and they were going over to the power plant on the C&E. Kind of interesting. These tracks right across here connected to the C&E right around a little loop off to the left. And a couple times a year during the September Labor Day fair over at Burton, they would run a streetcar across these B&O tracks, but the B&O didn't allow them to have any electricity. So the streetcar had to coast about a quarter mile across these tracks over to the electrified C&E. In this particular shot over here, the photograph would be taken off to the left and the B&O main would be over on this side. But here we have a C&E streetcar going around the loop over to the other side. Here is the Bell Vernon Creamery. And I don't believe it was served by the B&O, but the carriage, milk to Cleveland on the C&E. And a long-time customer on the B&O here was Fitzinger Feed, from 1981. Probably, I think it carried about, let me see, maybe about 15 cars a month on the Lake Branch. And here you can see the cars are being set off, and the Chardon turn is coming back out onto the main line. We're at milepost 24, and now we're going to Windsor, about milepost 26, and we're just short of Burton. We're just south of Burton Station. And there was an 8.5 mile Windsor branch. Here you can see a little bit of the grade, and it was just a northbound connection onto the main line of the B&O over here. Now here you can see the Windsor Quarry over here. The water tower over here, I'm not sure if it was built by the Pittsburgh, Painesville, and Fairport or not. It was at the end of the branch. There was a lot of debate whether there was a Y that was located in this area. And I've seen maps that showed Ys, but the B&O valuation maps gave no hint of a Y, and even early P&Y history that I read said the P&Y was just interested in building to the Windsor Quarry, but they never built it. It was a PP&F that built it, and it lasted only 9 years. By 1899, they had lifted the tracks. Now we're at Burton Station, milepost 26.8. And I forgot to mention, up near the Windsor northbound connection, there was a water tower that was located there, but it was discontinued in 1926. And here we can see a northbound train. This is what it would be. It looked like in 1981. And it looked like as late as maybe 1980, they still interchanged a couple cars here. And it may have been from a plant over in Burton called Burton Rubber, but they may have interchanged more likely at Middlefield and not this Burton track. I just wasn't 100% sure about that. This is what it would look like in 2020. The real Burton was about 2 miles west, and it was on the Cleveland and Eastern. And like I said, there was no interchange with, Burton itself, but there were several companies over here like Burton, Broom, and Handle that did interchange with the Lake Branch, probably over at, the Burton siding or over at Middlefield. And just a note on a C&E, there's streetcar, barns, maybe because of the inclement weather, but like I said, they were very modern looking, and they just weren't little sheds. They put a lot of effort into their streetcar stations. And in this case, now we're just a mile or two up from, Burton at milepost 26 and 27 to East Clareton. And we're going to be climbing, 1,183 feet to the summit of Chardon at 1226. And Herbert in 1956, he got to ride in the brakeman seat up at, and so he's leaning out the cab of the EM1. And this was a rare nonstop meet at East Clareton. It was a favorite meeting place, but the year that he rode in 56, it was nonstop. He captured a little bit of a fantastic history. And Irv Milheim, a friend of mine, he was an operator at P-Tire. He worked at a number of Erie tires. So in the book, he had an entire collection of various forms. In this case, I have form 19. And in the book, I have, like I said, a number of them scattered, but they're interesting to read. And in these cases, the EM1s, it shows you where they're located and who they were assisting or and waiting. And just over at East Clareton, where we left with Mr. Harwood. And now we're over at the C&E over in the B&O Lake Branch. And the C&E, interchanged with the B&O from 1900 till 1926. And they had an interesting, B&O is located right off to the left is the Chardon and to Lake Branch, Painesville. And here we have, one of their, this was actually a work trolley. You can see the two men up on the line poles here. Eventually they would fill this trestle in. And when they filled it in from 1913 to 1920, eventually, they had a lot of fumes and eventually broke out into a big slag fire, which required special firefighter or firemen to come in, and it caused an explosion. And I'm not sure, I don't think it hampered any of the B&O passenger travel, but I'm sure the passenger trains as well as the freight trains, were going through sulfur springs. I mentioned about the C&E connection. It was located over here. There were 2,000-foot sidings located over here, for the C&E would, set off any of their freight, and the B&O would push their freight, in particular coal cars. In the book, I have a couple maps that show these connections. I'm always interested in the streetcar connections to railroads, in particular the Lake Branch having 5 or 6, and a lot of ruins around this particular trestle today. Now, just about a quarter mile from the last shot was the Chardon Water Station. And this is going to the Chardon Station, and this is going up into the Chardon yard. They had a 14-track yard here. And this is possibly the only remaining structure on the Lake Branch of original B&O building. This was their filtration plant that was located right here. And I think there's a move in Chardon to preserve that building, and it's right alongside the Highland Maple bike trail today. And here we have Chardon Station. It's a view west towards Painesville. The Chardon Y was located over here. It was dismantled in 1926. And there were a group of new B&O hoppers located over here. And I'm sure they were going to the Lake Trade and the McMyler operation coal dumper. They're probably 50-ton hoppers. I really couldn't tell for sure. And here's in 1980, the Chardon station. A year later, the mast was gone, and it was B&O signal crew number 1 that removed it. And this was once the largest rail yard in northeastern Ohio, from about 1890 to maybe 1920, when they started dismantling it. And Chardon had, a dozen industries. This was one of the last large industries, Chardon rubber, which was, tied in with Johnson rubber down at Middlefield. And they always had to, B&O always had to watch when they located cars here, because on the box cars always carried a type of lamp black, and if they didn't position them right, the crew could come off with black all over them. Now we've come down the Erie escarpment down towards Painesville. And in this case over here, we have a northbound a B&O coal train. They were all run as extras, and he is has an approach, slow approach here towards the the nickel plate, where milepost 43, and this was a siding to Union Sand and Stone. Later on, when the iron ore docks were discontinued, this company moved out onto the closer to Lake Erie. Now, in this case over here, we're just maybe back a little bit from the coal train here, and you can see our elevation is 696. We've been dropping down from 1,200 and some feet up at Chardon. Bridge 340 is over Route 44, northbound train. But this trestle was designed by Miss Olive Dennis in 1923. She was the only female civil engineer at that time hired by the B&O by President Daniel Willard. And she continued, he was so impressed with her work that she continued working on the B&O up till she retired in the early 1950s. She designed different plates on the passenger cars, the air conditioner ventilators. And I might add that Herbert Harwood's wife, Sharon, was always interested in Olive Dennis, because they went to the same college, Gloucester College, and she would do presentations, I believe, down at the B&O Museum. And here's my friend Bud Puskarich once again. Like I said, I'm always interested in rail fans and their photographs, and here we're a little bit north of Chardon, and it's May of 1982. Lifting of the tracks, and Frank Volhard is taking the photograph. And we're located on the Erie escarpment. We're near where Route 90 crosses over, and it was 1.8% grade at this point, maybe for a half a mile or so. But it was the steepest on the Erie escarpment. But now we're getting a little bit closer to Painesville and the nickel plate crossing. Here we have a 1973 photograph of a B&O train, and back in the woods in the field here, we have the interchange track with the NK&P, or the later the N&W. And here we have a 1969 shot. Painesville switcher is crossing the NKP, and is going to be setting off over here on the interchange tracks. And there was a good bit of interchange, with the B&O and the NKP, throughout the years, right up till the end. here we have a Lake Branch passenger service number 608. You know, when they started running the doodle bugs, or in this case, you know, the Brill motor in August of 31, 1927, was a wreck, and the wreck took the life of and it was on the NKP crossing, and there was a mix-up in her signals, and the NKP train, you know, plowed into the doodlebug with the loss of a student engineer. And it was a student engineer's first trip, and his newlywed wife was along with him, you know, riding as a passenger, and she suffered, you know, severe injuries, and her husband was killed. And this 608 was rebuilt. The 603, it was replaced by, you know, 6040, but in May of 1930, a motor coach, a diesel motor coach, is going to, for 2 years, is going to replace the passenger service on the Lake Branch. Now, in this case here we have the Lake Branch running north to south. Now we have west to east, the New York City main line, you know, Chicago to New York, you know, former Lakeshore and Michigan Southern. The B&O Painesville yard is located in this area. Passenger service was located at this point in the freight house. And at one time over Richmond Street, the P&Y and even the B&O had built up here to this point, but they never made it to the New York Central Station. They wanted to have a Union Station, but it never really happened. This is Richmond Street here in Painesville. Notice the B&OY over here. Now at this point here, this is a B&O trackage over to New York Central connection. In the book, I talk about the New York Central track pans that were, you know, located here, about maybe a half a mile west from the New York Central crossover here, where New York Central AF Tire was located right here. And notice the cooling and the water tower here on the B&O also. These were torn down in the late 40s. Now, once we cross over the New York Central tracks, you know, this is going to Fairport, an earlier name, Richmond, Grand River. These tracks today are operated by the Grand River Railway, but located right at this point on Richmond Road, which goes underneath the New York Central and you know, crosses over the B&O here. A little blue line is the 1929 new main line that's going to go over to the B&O new main yard, which is going to go to the iron and coal docks. Oh, incidentally, this is Painesville Power and Light here. And off here to the right is a huge B&O repair yard. We're going to take a look at that, you know, in a moment. But first of all, we're going to go past the B&O Painesville engine terminal. Here's a 1956 shot with EM1s. This is a Y sitting over here. Here we have our CPL, you know, signal. Here's a 1956 shot of the yard with an EM1, and I believe it's a 282 sitting over here. Here we have our colored positional signal over here. And then 1968, you know, steam was gone in 56, you know, maybe by the fall of 57 for sure. And the building is still standing. But it's interesting. In the next photograph, you can see the Painesville shop over here is a green field with some coal piles in the end, now possibly for Painesville Power and Light. And here we have a B&O train, approaching the New York Central crossover. And my experience is, the PV 97 and 92, they always called him the Painesville man. Here's 1980, a northbound train over the New York Central crossover. AF Tire would have been located over in this area. And what you see, AF Tire and New York Central AF Tire, and it was closed in August of 1956. Here we have a couple of northbound 080s, and the 080s, did a lot of switching at the Painesville shops and over at the coal docks, and I'm sure the earlier iron ore docks as well. But this 080, as early as 1954, every now and then they put it on as a helper going up the Erie Escarpment. And now we're going to take, we're located in this area here. We've crossed over the New York Central, and then we're going to be taking a look at, going over to, it says Richmond. This is actually, Grand River. Morton Salt would be located over here. These tracks still see action today by the Grand River Railway. But Fairport is actually located over in this side. It just gives you a little not quite correct location over here. But, and I want to point out there's a bridge that's going to connect us from Richmond over to Fairport. That's Bridge 342. Like I said, it gets a little bit complicated here, but Bridge 342, it's the old P&Y, swing bridge over to Fairport Harbor. But in 1929, the new bridge 43 was built over the Grand River over to the B&O New Yard. And I hope I explain it without, too many complications here. This is Bridge 343, still standing in 2021. But in 1980, it was seeing action. A couple of GP30s bringing a Painesville man over to the B&O New Yard. And this is B&O Bridge 343. It's actually the third Bridge 343 in this area. But now we're going to backtrack to the B&O Old Main Line. The New Yard is located about a mile east of the old repair facility, which operated from the 1900 to the 1960s. But in the 1970s, well, when the steam ended, this became the B&O diesel terminal. And I might have mentioned earlier, kind of reminded me a lot of Newcastle, abandoned buildings, a lot of changes going on. And here we have, a set of, ABA units here, and they're working the Painesville area. Maintenance cars, the fueling was altogether, changing. Now, we're about a mile north of that repair yard. And here we have a Jeep, a GP9, and it's probably carrying cars, not possibly empties. No, I take that back. It could be loaded coal cars over to Erie Coke and Chemical, and it's going to go over to the Fairport, Painesville, and Eastern Railroad. But so the repair facility is back here to the left. These tracks, B&O Old Main Line up to, Morton Salt. And, up until 1969, it served the A. Staley's for the soybean operation. Prior to that, there were the B&O warehouses and elevators. And I have maybe 5 or 6 pages in the book which explains these boat to rail operation. The bridge you see here, a lot of debate. You see it in map after map, swing bridge, drawbridge. But, I'll say argument after argument, no swing bridge here, no drawbridge on the B&O, but there absolutely was. The B&O valuation maps, show this as a pivot on the bridge, and it was removed in 1994. But I have a couple interesting pages in the book which I think explain it. But I think the bottom line, the valuation map and the circle and the pivot explain it. Okay, now we're going to the FP&E crossing of the B&O in the Fairport area. Off to the right here was Bridge 342, the swing bridge we just crossed. And also it was Diamond Alkali and their limestone plants or limestone docks. And also the second Bridge 340, no, I'm sorry, the first Bridge 343 was located right in this area, but it was filled in 1929 when they built the other Bridge 343 located back here south of the New Yard. Here you can see a Painesville man, sitting over in the B&O New Yard. Off to the left here is Diamond Alkali. These tracks go to the old B&O coal docks, iron ore docks, and these tracks, likewise. These tracks, incidentally, 1 mile of old B&O tracks are operated by the NS today. It's the NS Fairport tracks. Run out of Quantiot, Ohio. Now we're in the iron ore era on the Fairport, which lasted from 1878 to 1946. And these were Brown hoists, antiquated. They operated up till 1946. And they had a faster, the electric Brown hoist were installed in 1906, which were a little faster operation. But they were still antiquated, and they were going to be replaced by the self-unloaders. And here we have an early wellback iron ore boat coming from Duluth, and it would be unloaded here on the Brown hoist, which would drop down, and a scoop would come down into the hatch of the ship, and then draw it back up, and then carried back up into the ore piles. In this photograph over here, you can see this is the power plant, and this is looking towards Lake Erie, but the power plant would have operated the earlier Brown hoist. Now, we've come from the B&O iron ore era. We're going to go over to the B&O and P&Y coal era. And this lasted from 1874 to December of 64. And we had the Myler coal dumper. And what you're seeing here is actually the second coal dumper. The first one was called the Big Fin, which operated from about 1894 up to 1906. And here we have a 1956 Canadian boat. There was a lot of Canadian coal trade going on. And here we can see the Myler apron, and it would drop it down into the hatches of the Maiden Prince. And here you can see a little bit of the B&O trackage over here, which would be located on the far side of the McMyler machine. Just a little note here. You can see some B&O hoppers back here, slightly elevated, and they would come down on a grade, and then up onto the hoist area, and they were 50-ton hoppers, which would be lifted up into the onto the apron. And here you can see this area. This was a telescopic tube that dropped down into the hatch, extended out more than what you see right here, reaching down into the hoist. And they called it a giant with gentle fingers because it would not, there was very little coal breakage. And over here it was a kickback track. And all this is explained a little bit more in the book. I've talked a lot about Bridge 343, but in some of the B&O maps, they call this B&O Bridge 343-2. Now we're over on the B&O New Yard, October 30th, 1981, the last run to Fairport. We're over on the east side of the Grand River. The FP&E would be here a little bit to the left. And on this day of operation, the last day of operation, I have a picture of it in a book. There's just off to the left at the B&O freight station here. There's just a man and a small boy, sitting watching the last train come in. Now lifting the Lake Branch in the spring and the summer of 1982. This is Johnny Cake Ridge Road. You can see the mast, the flag is gone. You can see the rail train located. Bert Fitzgerald was the engineer on this particular rail train. This is up near Chardon, and you can see the multi-purpose rail train up here, and the sleds could come underneath and pull the spikes up, and they wouldn't even disconnect it at the joints. They would just pull maybe a quarter-mile section. I don't think it was quite a quarter-mile long up onto the flat cars. In the book, there are some more detailed pictures of it. And here we're down in Middlefield. We're coming near the end of the slideshow here, and a little bit of the closure of the Lake Branch. And it's simply B&O economics, I think, that really closed it. Going back to 46, the 37,000 cars, antiquated brown hoist. We go to 1979, they said there were 77 ore cars, but they didn't use the word ore. I used the word ore. It just said metallic. 22 coal cars, total of 1,524 cars on the Lake Branch, and 600 of them were chemical loads, probably going to the different chemical plants, Uniroyal, and a couple others that replaced diamond alkali or diamond shamrock. 1958, 6-day-a-week service, the Chardon turns. They went Monday, Wednesday, and Friday up to Chardon or up to Painesville. Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, returned to the forest, ended. In 64, the coal trade ended. These McMillers were, long antiquated, and they were replaced by a B&LE, agreement going over to Conneaut. And I think there was just one other McMiller, maybe over in the Toledo area that was operating or maybe standing. In the 1960s, the Chardon turn was only Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. These were for automobile gaskets, 15 or 20 cars up and 15 or 20 cars back. But these vehicle gaskets, everything was being turned over to trucks. 1975, the B&O applied for the close the southern section, but this did not happen. In 1975, parallel to the Lake Branch was the PY&A, and it was abandoned, Warren to Ashtabula. In 1970, the closing of Diamond Alkali. And, there were, 1,000 cars interchanged with, diamond alkali. And so, I mean, that had a definite effect. 1978, the closing of Youngstown Sheet and Tube, Republic Steel in Hazleton, the Ohio Works, it had some effect, but probably not, as much effect as what one would think. The coal and iron ore to these mills came from, other places altogether. And there was it just wasn't on the main east and west main lines. And now we go to 2013, these the district runs were to from the forest, anything to Warren Republic Steel. Incidentally, it was not part of the Lake Branch, and in DeForest in 2013 was the last run on the old main line. And one thing I just wanted to point out, maybe I don't have it here, copper weld is as early as, I already mentioned in the 1960s, they would carry many as 60 to 100, cars over up the trackage, up to copper weld. But that was because of the Vietnam War. And they were all district runs out of DeForest. When the Vietnam War ended, these 40, 50, 100 car trains up to copper weld, ended. But copper weld to DeForest, it was operated by the CSX, then Ohio Central, circa 1993. And a portion of these B&O tracks were lifted in 1988, DeForest and North Warren. Ohio Central uses some of these tracks today, but rarely, I believe. And Norfolk Southern owns the Erie tracks that we saw at the Erie B&O tracks, and they just use it for car storage today. In this case, I'm going back to a little bit of B&O trackage that's operated. This is over near Perry, a little bit east of Fairport, where Norfolk Southern operates to, I think it's Lubrizol or Equistar, where they, serve 2 or 3 times a week. And then the Grand River Railway operates 2.56 miles of old B&O trackage. This engine, though, is not on the Grand River Railroad. I think it left in 2017, 2016. And they have one leased engine today. And Morton Salt was sold this summer, and I'm not exactly sure of the status. Now we're approaching the last 2 slides in the program. Like I said, I'm always partial to rail fans. In this case, Herb Harwood and Bill Vigrass, who was his friend, they both belonged to the Cleveland Railroad Club at that time. And this is Mr. Vigrass, sitting, over here, and Herb is taking the photographs of these EM1s, and it's at Fales Spur, and on a northbound train. This is Mr. Harwood's 1953 family Ford car. And Mr. Harwood, he said about the Lake Branch, he said it was unpredictable, infrequent, difficult to learn about, steam fading fast. But he said it was a handsome EM1 articulated locomotives that he found just by chance that brought him over to the EM1s. And he was last over here in 1957 and has not returned. In the book, I have maybe a 20-page section of Mr. Harwood's photographs on the Lake Branch. And here's picture of Mr. Harwood over in Warwick, Ohio, photographing on the B&O main line. And, he asked the crew to make some smoke when they were departing. And he often sent them prints of his photographs. And here's maybe age 26, before he left to, go to work in the CNO over in Baltimore. And this is his camera. He used a Century graphic camera. Most reporters at that time used a speed graphic. And he had a slight adaptation made to the lens. And the photographs was taken by his friend Phil Horning. And that concludes the presentation.
All right.
Anybody have any questions at all?
I have one. Was there any, do you know if there was any last ditch attempt by the railroad or the people locally on that branch to try and keep it going, or I mean, they knew the coal was going away and the CNO was already deciding to shift traffic to other terminals. But do you think there was just not enough of a industrial base to keep it going for the railroad, or was there more of just a lack of will and just kind of a perfect storm of the railroad's cutting costs and the industry is changing in the area, and it just wasn't going to be able to keep going?
I think it was a matter of, like I said in one slide, B&O economics, and it just wasn't going to happen. The only two industries were, Chardon Rubber and Burton Rubber, and they were too close to Painesville. Just for truck traffic and off around 90, I would guess. But I never heard there was any, plan to keep it going.
No insurgency mounted by the division to keep it going.
No, I don't believe so. And talking with Mr. Harwood or Frank Volhart and others, I never heard that there was any talk of keeping it going. And in my research, I never found any newspaper articles or anything either, Nick.
Okay.
But Wayne, you said that the iron ore, any large quantity of iron ore actually ended about 1946.
Right. Yep. And I think it was in August of 46.
And the coal, and basically any large movement of coal through Fairport ended in 1964. So it's
right, December of 1964.
So at that point, it's basically whatever industrial traffic was on the line was what kept the line going.
Right. And there was quite a bit up at Diamond Alkali, or it later became Diamond Shamrock. And there was a good bit of interchange, at that point. And like I said, with the Chardon turns, and there were, a handful of lumber companies that provided a small amount of traffic along the Lake Branch as well, and West Farmington and up in Chardon. But the copper world, did a big industry, but you're only 6 or 7 miles out of the forest.
Yeah, and the Chardon, the large yard in Chardon was for the industries that at one time were located in Chardon.
It was probably more extensive than that. I think that there was a lot of iron ore traffic that was maybe set on top of the hill, and they would distribute it from that point. Empties up there. There was just more space on top of the hill, but by 1926, it was just changing too much, and that yard was basically, by 1926 they had lifted quite a few of those tracks. Like I said, they had many as 14, 15, and 16 tracks on the valuation maps, and they had, like I said, at one time as many as 15 industries. And even at the end, maybe a half a dozen. When I'm saying the end, probably in, the 1960s and 1970s. And
Okay,
one thing
thank you.
kind of interesting, they out of Chardon, they had Swift had a plant there, and they carried sheep and hogs in and out of Chardon.
Hmm.
I mentioned that in the book. I didn't mention that in the PowerPoint. Yeah, in the valuation maps, they show the where the chutes were located for Swift meats.
It's really interesting. Yeah, that's when Swift had a lot of smaller packing houses spread out.
Yeah, but that was interesting. But they had sheep also. Now that I mentioned that, but that was maybe in a couple different places along the Lake Branch.
Well, Nick, I think that's about it. If we don't have any more questions, why I think we'll just wrap it up for Wayne's presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, okay, guys. Thanks
Thank you,
for
Wayne.
tuning in, and Nick, thanks for the help and getting this inexperienced person going on Zoom.
We're all, for the whole year, we've all been learning. So you are not alone.
Okay, guys. Thank you.
Thank
Now,
you.
Yeah,
Nick,
thank you, Wayne.
Wayne.
Okay.
bef-